Good morning. My name is Aaron. I serve as the pastor of our Crossroads campus here at Christ Church, and we're in John chapter 5 today. In this passage, Jesus is healing a man at the pool of Bethesda. The story creates kind of like a layering effect, actually, of a few different pieces. First, it layers the reality of healing and salvation coming from Jesus, and on top of that, the need to rely on Jesus and not the law, like obedience to a specific pattern. So I want to look at John 5, starting in verse 1. Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. Now, there is in Jerusalem near the sheep gate a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here, a great number of disabled people used to lie: the blind, the lame, paralyzed. One who was there had been invalid for 38 years. And when Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, Do you want to get well? Sir, the invalid replied, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me. And Jesus said to him, Get up, pick up your mat, and walk. And at once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. The day on which this took place was a Sabbath. Now, before and while Jesus walked on the earth, the people of Israel had been given to systems of superstition in trying to know and experience God. Often this revealed itself in early history because of a lack of understanding of the human body, of medicine, the world, other scientific advancements, most of which were starting to be revealed through advancing technologies. But in the first century, it was incredibly prevalent for people to rely on these signs. And evidently the pool of Bethesda would stir, would bubble in some way, and the first person to get down into the water would experience some level of relief from their ailment. And Jesus came across this man who had been not able to get in. He had been invalid for 38 years, had issues getting down into the water. He was depressed, he was helpless, he was pressed down. And Jesus looked beyond the man's superstition and excuses. He looked beyond the man's depression and his poor theology. Jesus brought him healing. That is what Jesus does. He looks beyond our brokenness and shows us grace. This is the salvation of Jesus. It cannot be earned by obedience to a system, to good theological knowledge, or even some form of familial condition or connection. So now to verse 10 and 11. And so the Jewish leaders, after he was healed, right, walks up, he's been an invalid for 38 years. The Jewish leaders said to the man who had been healed, It is the Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat. What an interesting thing, right? And then verse 11. But he replied, The man who made me well said to me, Pick up your mat and walk. The Sabbath in this story is an excellent example of how the Jewish people were trying to experience God by meticulously keeping the law. They couldn't even see the grace, the healing, the salvation of Jesus through the fog of their desire to be obedient to the law. A law that was insufficient to provide the salvation they were looking for. They were caught up in the temporal and they missed the eternal. I believe in the value of the Sabbath as a spiritual practice. We can experience a fuller life with God by keeping it in general rhythm and shalom with all of life. But that was not what these Jewish leaders were worried about. Today, as we wrap up, my prayer for you is that you both see the healing grace of God's free salvation for you and the reality that all of our obedience to God is in response to Jesus' great love for us. I hope you have a great rest of your day.